Hey, welcome to the FLŌ TRIBE podcast. So in this episode, I'm speaking with Audrey Farenga, who's a nutrition expert and trainer here in Los Angeles, California. I really enjoyed speaking to Audrey. We talked about all kinds of interesting stuff. We talked about how an early back injury and an IBS diagnosis got her started on her journey into health and fitness. We talked about training for the spirit instead of just the body. We talked about how to achieve the right mindset to achieve your goals. Anyway, we talked about lots of interesting stuff. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did.
So I'm Audrey Farenga, also known as Health AF, which I always used to say was just for my name, Health AF, but also, as fuck.
Yeah.
But now I'm realizing it's also because I put health before fitness, so health and fitness. And throughout my life, I always loved being active and sporty and, doing all these different, karate, dance, gymnastics, cheerleading, running, and eating healthy. But I actually had a pretty severe back injury and undiagnosed IBS. And that played a huge struggle into my capabilities, the way I felt inside, body image issues. And throughout the course of my education and helping other people, I further came to my conclusion and now my philosophy, which is that we're putting your health before your fitness while also taking care of your fitness. And that's what I'm about.
Right. So I find everyone that gets into this field has a story like that. Mm-hmm. At some point in their life, something happened that made them realize how important it is. Mm-hmm. To take care of your body, to take care of your health, mm-hmm. right? Sometimes you'll go a long time without having an issue, and that's why you don't really take it seriously. But as soon as something comes up, whether it's an injury, whether it's some sort of digestive issue, whatever, that's the driver, right? So how much of an impact did that actually have on your course?
A huge one. I feel like, in college, I was going to school for nutrition and dietetics. But it was much more involved in a hospital setting than it was in a preventative setting. So I wasn't really getting the care that I needed for myself. And I kept thinking, I just, it's college. I drink too much. I have too much coffee. It's not really an internal problem. But as time went on, I was practically feeling like collapsing on my runs. I was so exhausted. I was really at my wit's end with the amount of bloating and discomfort that was going on. And I just felt like for the amount that I exercised and ate healthy, why did my skin look so bad? Why did I feel so bad? Why did I feel so crazy in my brain? And finally, at a certain point I actually went to the hospital because I thought I was having an appendicitis. My IBS pain was so bad. Western doctors really didn't know what to do with me, and I turned to a naturopath. Yeah. And from there, really healing my gut, not just, okay, eat this, don't eat that, more fiber, generic, but no, you need actual supplements and substances to help your body push through this sickness, really, and then overcome it. And also working for a chiropractor and getting chiropractic care and realizing, again, I needed to be healed. Yeah. And also, then my exercise went better, and those same exercises had much better purpose.
Yeah. So I think that's awesome. And I'd be curious to know what were some of the changes that you made from a dietary standpoint, because I think a lot of people suffer from IBS or some form of digestive issue.
Yeah.
And like you said, I think a lot of Western medicine is very black and white, right? It's if they don't understand what's going on, they kind of give up on looking for a solution, right? It's like, well, here's what we know. Especially, I think in Western medicine, most doctors get maybe 5% of their training has to do with nutrition, not even.
Right,
not even. So they put very little effort into researching those things. So what are some of the changes that you made that you felt had a really big impact?
Yeah, so at first, the first thing I did was go on the low FODMAP diet. Which stands for basically a lot of fruits and vegetables have the ability to ferment in your gut. Yeah. And if you're dealing with any form of blockages in your system, they're not getting eliminated, they're definitely fermenting.
Yeah.
And even if you're not gonna forever have a sensitivity to these foods, it was really important to just get rid of them at first. And then the supplements, I took things that supported my liver. And I took things that just supported general digestion, like digestive enzymes and stuff, just to kind of give it a boost. And then I went through a few years of like trying different foods and it not working out so well. Definitely being gluten-free is key. And now I'm realizing dairy-free also. I think one of the biggest things to realize about dietary changes is that it's not going to last forever, in the sense that even if you think you have a sensitivity to certain foods, or if you're not eating certain foods right now, everything can be a medicine, and what didn't work for you before might be what you need now, and vice versa.
Yeah. I think the gluten-free is also something that I follow and found it to be surprisingly impactful. You know, and I've never had a sensitivity to it, but my wife did. And so she started eating like that, and I'm like, all right, I'll give it a try. And then suddenly energy levels went up. Like these crashes that I would get went away. And then I'd have a meal with gluten because I figured, oh, whatever, it doesn't affect me. Oh, wait, it does.
Yes.
Because you take it away for a while and then you go back to it and you're like, oh, I remember this. This sucks.
Yeah. And like we get used to thinking that like being so stuffed or feeling like
That's
you need
the
a
normal.
nap. Oh,
Yeah.
this is what being full feels
The
like.
afternoon crash.
Right.
Yeah.
Like that's not what being full is supposed to feel like. That's not how we're supposed to feel on a regular basis. Gluten is actually not that good for anybody.
Right.
It has the ability to cross the blood-brain barrier, so it's gonna create brain fog no matter who you are. So yeah.
And you talked about fermenting fruits and vegetables. What are examples of those?
So the low FODMAP foods, or rather high FODMAP foods that do ferment in the gut, are going to be onions, what else am I saying? Asparagus, mushrooms, tropical fruits, gluten, soft dairy, but not hard dairy, which is why I didn't give it up at first.
Okay.
And then a whole list of other types of things. Like I wasn't even supposed to have garlic, but after a while I was like, it's definitely not garlic, and I just started eating it again. And so, those foods can, again, even if you're not sensitive to them, if you're having stuff going on in your gut, then they might have a chance to ferment in there anyway.
Yeah, amazing. So knowing all this at this point, what would you say is your definition of being healthy? Because I think it's a question I like to ask everyone, because everyone has a slightly different take on it. So I'd be curious to know, what's your definition of being healthy?
Yeah, so, my definition of being healthy begins in the gut. So if you are not having foods that inflame your body on a regular basis, and you're, eliminating well, and you're eating to your hunger and fullness cues, and you're in tune with what's going on with your gut, then most likely everything else is being taken care of just fine. And also, being healthy involves the way you eat. Like, do you have an aggressive attitude with food? Because all of this, of course, also then affects your energy levels and your mind, body, and spirit. Yeah. And so if your mind, body, and spirit are all in alignment, and you're doing exercises that you like to do, like cycling is great exercise, but my spirit loves to dance, loves to run. Yeah. And so if I'm only doing cycling for cardio, my spirit isn't satisfied.
Feels like a chore.
Yeah, and then I'm not really being healthy because I'm not balanced. I'm doing something that's a punishment. And so for me, being healthy means your gut is healthy, your mind, body, spirit, and your healing power is all healthy, and that you're also finding a way to exercise that is keeping you in balance and not something that pushes you out of balance.
Nice. So segueing to exercise now, what is your go-to? You mentioned dance, you mentioned running, but also for the people you work with and for people in general, what's your philosophy on exercise? Because there's so many ways you can do it. And I think what you talked about is finding something that connects to your spirit, right? Like, cycling is great exercise. It'll get your heart rate up. It'll do all the good things it should do for your body. But I just find it super boring. So if I'm doing it, it feels like I'm doing this because I have to, not because I want to.
Exactly.
Right? So what's your philosophy on exercise?
So my philosophy on exercise, basically, you do need some form of strength training. I mostly strength train. I love it. I love being able to do bodyweight exercises that are very complicated and really force me to connect my mind and body. And then I also love, just being very strong and independent in my life. Like, I can carry all my equipment and stuff. I don't have to ask for help. And so for exercise philosophy, I feel like there needs to be a balance of strength, mobility, flexibility, and of course cardio. And then you can kind of choose your different modalities for that. So at a certain point, depending on your goals, I might have to say, I'm sorry, like we've tried everything you have to do HIIT right now, because that's what you need to reach your fat loss goals or something. Or, well, you really need to strength train if you want to avoid, you know, your knee pain from all the running you do. So sometimes there's a have to, but for the most part, I think if you can just enjoy something that actually challenges you, like a lot of the time when people say, oh, just enjoy yourself, they're like, oh, I'll go for a hike and have a picnic and that counts as exercise, right? It's like, well, sort of, but I mean, like, you know, challenge yourself a little bit, like try to surf or go for a run on your hike or something, you know? Does that answer your question? I don't.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think what you're saying also is if you fall, sometimes the danger is falling in love with this one thing. Right? Meaning you'll have guys, especially guys that just fall in love with weightlifting, right? And that's all they do. But then they can't touch their toes.
Right.
They can't sit down and get up easily. Like there's just so many restrictions to their movement after that. And then you'll have people, example, who fall in love with yoga, but they don't really do any of the strength components of yoga flow. So they end up very flexible and kind of very bendy and all that, but they have no strength. Right. So you have to find that balance. And I think that there are ways to kind of touch on everything as long as you're doing it in a cool way that's kind of fun.
Exactly. So really finding the blend. Like I love to do calisthenics and heavy lifting, so I like make sure that I get both.
And I think for that it's just education.
Right.
So for people who don't know what to do, sometimes that's the problem. Is like, I know I should do all these things, but how do I do all of that? So I think what you touched on, what I really like is body weight. So as a trainer, it's great to have a gym with all the toys that come with that, but I think you don't need all of that to get a good strength training workout, right? So what are your favorite, some of your favorite body weight exercises?
Some of my favorite body weight exercises. So definitely push-ups, definitely pull-ups. And then I really like to do complicated kind of core things. Like you'd be surprised how hard it is for a lot of people to stay like a pencil and roll all the way around and keep rolling without using their arms and only using their core strength. And that's one of those movements where, like, you know, a heavy weightlifter might have problems figuring out how to do that because they only know how to externalize their force. They don't know how to internalize it. And I think it's just so good for your body to do body weight. Other body weight exercises, I really love jumping. You know, like jump lunges or jumping as far as you can. Those are really good too.
Right, and I think what you touched on with push-ups and pull-ups as a woman is something that most women have a really hard time with. And I think that if I had advice for any woman trying to get into strength training, just start with push-ups. Right? If you can get to a point where you're doing 10 push-ups, you will feel so much different. Right? You will feel so much stronger. Because,
and confident.
And confidence. Because I think at some point, the first time sucks because you feel weak. But the body adapts so quickly, especially with body weight. Because I feel like you're using your own body as your measuring stick. So you're able to just go in there. So what's a way that you would introduce body weight training to someone who's never done it before?
So I would usually start with something like push-ups, you know, and we start, I like to put like yoga blocks under people so that they're not all the way on the ground, and then they can kind of learn the arm movement to press up. I will say I do supplement that with a good amount of chest presses because a lot of the time, especially if you're first starting out, bridging the gap between having not enough strength to lift our over 100-pound selves is one of the biggest things to overcome.
For sure.
So I would say, you know, you start with the knees, then you go knees to toes, then you elevate yourself from your toes. And like you said, like just kind of getting after it, start with something. I think that there's a misconception that, like, you know, you need to be way too strong in order to be able to do push-ups or something, or there's girl push-ups. I'm so glad that that's barely even a term anymore. Guys do push-ups from their knees too. You know, you have to get it right. So I'd say starting with something like that for sure.
Nice. And how do you work on the mindset with the people you train? Because I think with women, one misconception is that somehow being strong also means I'm going to get bigger. Right? And that's just not true.
It's not true at all. Okay, I can do 30 push-ups, okay? And that's with me flexing. Most of the time, you know, people are like, you look so lean and this and that, and like, oh, your arms are thin. And I'm like, yeah, well, these arms can also do a lot of pull-ups and push-ups. And like, I think that, so you touched upon like, are women going to get large from this?
Yeah.
If you're doing body weight, very, very small chance that you're going to get large from doing body weight exercises.
Yeah.
In fact, I have men who love body weight and love calisthenics, but they want to gain mass. And I'm like, I'm sorry, you have to lift weights.
Yeah.
You need a bigger stimulus to gain mass. I think diet has a lot to do with it. And like in terms of the mindset, so don't be scared. You're never gonna wake up one day and be like, oh my God, I'm the Hulk. It would take a lot of food and a lot of time to make you look bulky. And for the mindset, I kind of approach it differently for everyone. You kind of gotta get your little psychological hat on there and see what they're really afraid of or what they really want. And for the mindset, I'd say, first of all, think about the confidence that it brings to you.
Yeah.
And don't view this as pain, but view this as strength. So when you are trying to press up and it feels like, we're at the sticky point, right? There's that sticky point when you're halfway up that it's really hard to press all the way up. If you view your body as a vessel of strength, and you press the ground away from you rather than thinking, oh, I'm somehow going to struggle up there, then you're going to be able to do so much more.
Yeah.
In fact, something I see a lot with people who just started exercising is when they have dumbbells in their hands, they're kind of like letting the dumbbells wave around a little bit. And I'm like, no, you control the dumbbells. Yeah. They're yours to do your exercises, and like you have the strength for that. And being in the mindset of like, I have control over this. I think so many times, like you said, especially women approach exercise with all of this fear, but it's not a punishment and it's not a scary place. It's never as bad as you think it's going to be. You're always going to feel great after. And it's a celebration of what you can do. It's not a punishment for what you are.
That was really cool. I like what you just said there.
Thanks.
And I think it's also being okay with being strong, and being okay with being confident, and being okay with being physical. I've had clients who, as soon as the sweat starts, they feel like, oh, I'm sweating. I'm like, wait, what? Like, that's kind of the point. Like, fall in love with the process. Right. So how do you deal with that? Because I think a big issue sometimes is the results won't happen as fast as people want. So how do you help people fall in love with the process of achieving the results they're trying to get?
Well, it goes back to, again, like finding like something that they like, so even if there's something that might not be the best, if they absolutely love it and it gets them sweating, like, you know what, I tell them, hey, I would rather you be doing something that moves your whole body and your upper body, but if cycling is your absolute like thing, like then go do that, like that's the number one. And also mantras while you work out. So
nice.
My sister's a yoga instructor. I was brought to yoga at a very young age. And, like I've talked about so far, I have a very strong spiritual connection to my movement. And, having a goal of like, instead of like, all right, this is going to make me so skinny, I have to do this. Instead, it's like, how about being in tune and being like, oh, I love how my core feels when I do this, and I can really feel how strong I'm getting, and viewing it as strength and not pain. And another favorite one is just thinking of what it's getting rid of for you. And it doesn't have to just be getting rid of fat, but like, for example, sometimes if I'm going through a phase that I feel like I want to shed a little bit of fat or something like that, I'll think of all the things I did that might have gained the fat, and be like, I'm going to shed that night that I ate too much, and that was delicious though, I'm going to shed it, and kind of thinking about it from a different perspective, and really having something that brings you through this. Like, I'm doing this for me,
And I think you have to flip the script sometimes, because people, if they're too focused on the number, on the scale, for example, it becomes a very negative way of visualizing, right? Because that number will never come fast enough. But if instead you can get them to fall in love with the process that it's going to take to eventually get to that number, then the number doesn't matter anymore.
Exactly.
Right? Because if you're eating right and you're doing everything right, whatever number you end up at, that's probably the number you're meant to end up at.
Right. And so often, it's about composition rather than just the weight. And a lot of the time, when I talk to people about setting their goals, I'm like, hey, I just want to let you know that, let's say they don't have that much to lose in the first place. I'm like, once you lose those first 10 pounds, you might actually not want to lose those other 10, and you might like how you look, and you might just kind of want to switch out, like your body composition a little bit and be a little bit stronger and a little more defined, or like some people would rather have a more curvaceous look or something like that, and, kind of letting them know that it is more about that. And more often than not, I mean, scales you buy off of Amazon have a huge discrepancy in margin of error, and the way that your clothes fit you and the way that you feel is going to be so much more important than anything else. Yeah.
You mentioned how you have a very spiritual connection to movement, and I would really love to dive into that a little bit, because that's something I really connect with. So if I asked you, what do you mean by that? What do you have to say about that?
So it's one of those things that like you can almost put your finger on it, right? The spiritual connection is, it's not about like, oh, my mindset is just so strong about going to the gym. It's like, my body's aching for this. My heart, my mind, like, it's for me, moving freely, deciding what I want to do, whether it's doing something heavy or doing something upside down or going as fast as I can or being out in nature, there's this feeling of freedom. And we don't always get that. It's like, okay, well, now that you're at work, you have to do this. Now that you're going here, you have to do that. And so for me, it's the feeling of freedom. It's a feeling of strength, really, of knowing that I can bring myself wherever I want. And that is a huge connection. And I feel that, emotions can get settled in your body. And so if you have negative emotions and you don't take care of them, they're just going to rest in your tissues. And, they rest. Actually, I recently learned that your liver is associated with anger. And, it was very interesting to think about this area of your body, like being stuck with anger and upset. And like, you can almost feel that. And so with exercise, your blood is literally running through your whole body. When someone is going for a run and they run by you, you get like that woof, where like you can just feel that they're on another level. And so for me, it's about being kind of on that level. Like it's kind of like flying, you're just like, you're going and there's nothing stopping you. And I think that's one of the best feelings. Like, when you're driving and you're on an open road, it's kind of that feeling, no traffic in the way.
I think what you touched on about freedom, and I think freedom can mean many, many things. And for me, I think that, having that physical connection to self and being able to express your physicality in so many different ways is freedom, right? It's also the freedom to know that if I'm challenged physically, I'll be able to meet that challenge. If I have to use strength and I feel free versus having to turn to someone for help. Like you mentioned before, right? If I need to run up a flight of stairs for some reason and I can, that's freedom.
Exactly.
If I want to do anything physical, if I want to play with my kids, that's freedom. And the opposite is not having that freedom because my body doesn't allow me to do these things because I'm not taking care of it, because I'm not doing what I have to do. And so where do you find that happens for you, that balance between body and mind? Like there's that sweet spot sometimes where you find like the physical kind of, you surpass the physical and you end up in the mind if you do the right combination of things. Like where does that happen for you? Where's that sweet spot for you?
Definitely something outdoors. Like, I'll once in a while, just grab my Camelback and, go for a little run or something, and then do some yoga and then like meditate. And like how we were saying, you go for that. You get this exertion, and that feeling of exertion brings you to a new level of self because you're no longer stuck in the lower energy. And, so you're freed of all that low level energy, you're on a higher level. And then meditating outside is huge for me because I feel like I'm very receptive to the stuff around me. And so when you're actually having like, oh, this tree is like emitting oxygen and like these rocks are like emitting grounding energy, like, you can really absorb that. And then also just on the run itself, when you're like having that feeling of being unstoppable and going for, the adventure, and you don't know what's coming around the corner. I mean, I've run into deer, I've run into, wild dogs, like, you never know what's coming. It's a very exciting feeling. And like, when it goes into the mind is usually when you've gone past the first 25, 30 minutes, and it's also, I think it is highly related to how fast your blood is flowing through you, because that is your chi,
Well, it's also your neurochemistry.
Yes.
Right? So that the body at some point, you have to push it hard enough, and then it has this really cool system where it compensates for the challenge, right? Where it's kind of like your pain relief system.
Exactly.
Meaning like you just pushed me hard enough. Oh, now I'm going to give you the good stuff. I'm going to give you the opioids. I'm going to give you the cannabinoids. I'm going to give you all the good stuff that the body's capable of producing. And people don't realize that is we have this extremely powerful system that produces these amazing neurochemicals that will make you feel high, that will make you feel strong, that will make you feel confident, but you have to be willing to challenge yourself to get there.
Yeah,
right?
To access it.
Yeah,
You have
and
to
I
do
think
the
what you
work.
said about nature, what you said about outside, what you said about also that sense of adventure, right? Running on a treadmill and running in the mountain is not going to produce the same effect.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, running on a treadmill is definitely not as fun as running outside.
Yeah, and so you mentioned meditation. What is that practice like for you?
Oh, it should be better.
No, but I think just the fact that it's part of your life means
Yeah.
that you've already opened your mind to it. But what is it for you?
What is it for me?
Yeah.
Meditation is a time. Meditation for me is a time to. How do I explain? You know, a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm looking inward and I'm facing inward," but for me, I feel like it's actually absorbing.
Yeah.
You know, absorbing like the feeling of sunlight. You know, because your eyes are closed, you're getting like the feeling of the sunlight. You're getting the feeling of the air around you. So instead of, and you know, my sister, if she's watching this, she'd be like, "No, you need to look inside more." But for me, it's a feeling of peace and feeling the energy around you that is peaceful, and also bringing that internally, and not just you know, thinking, "Oh, no thoughts," but actually feeling all the thoughts of the nature around you and stuff like that. It's very grounding, and it brings you back to yourself. For me, I'm definitely much better about it when I am traveling or on a hike or I go somewhere that I'm like, wow, I need to just absorb this. That's usually the time that I find myself meditating the most.
I love that, because I think what you touched on is, I believe immensely, is this idea that when you meditate, you're connecting to the rest of the planet, to the rest of the energy that's surrounding you. And it's very difficult to do that in your bedroom or in your apartment because you're not exposed to it as much, right? But if you are in a forest, if you are by the ocean, there's this immediate sense of connection, especially if you exercise, if you went for a run and you've got that blood flow and you've got all those neurochemicals going. And then it is a moment to kind of just sit there and allow yourself to become part of the bigger energy, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of my philosophy on it. But I do also agree that it is an opportunity to look internally a little bit, because there is an opportunity for problem solving. There is an opportunity for perspective changing. There's an opportunity to elevate your consciousness and connect to your own self in a very different way. But so what would you say to someone who may be watching this and just needs a kick in the ass? They know they want this. They want that balance you've talked about. They want the strength. They want the peacefulness. They want all those things. They just don't know how to start. So what do you say to them?
So, you know, there's always the tough love. I got to say, look, you know, we can find all these different modalities you love and this and that, but at the end of the day, if you're not putting in the work, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So stop wishing, start doing.
Yeah.
And I want you to look at your calendar, find 1 hour a day that you're going to go for a walk, 60 minutes. And once that habit is secured, you now have your exercise laid out for you.
Yeah.
And then all you have to do is replace those walks with exercise. So if you don't know where to get started, just start by walking. It's gonna be really good for you actually, because it's gonna build your aerobic base. Now here's the thing: walking isn't the answer to life. Again, if you want further goals, you have to do more. So just start by fitting it in your schedule, and I think that's where the walking makes it so accessible to people, because like it's outside or even inside if you have to, and you just leave the house and it's happening. And then just be real with yourself that like, this is the schedule now, this is when it is. Make sure it's at a realistic time. So like, I'll never go to the gym on Saturdays. So like, Saturday's never a realistic time, you know? So that's like, you know, finding what's realistic, putting it in your schedule and holding yourself to it, because much too often people are in the mindset, but they're not actually doing anything. And there's all this feeling of like, oh, well, if I'm too tired or if it's not quite right or this or that, should I not do it? Like, no, you should definitely just do it. You know, definitely just do what you know is right and take care of yourself.
And from a nutrition perspective, because that's something that's also super important to you, how do they get started?
How to get started? Start by getting rid of everything that has high fructose corn syrup, maltodextrin, dextrose, corn syrup solids,
really
brown
yummy.
rice
I don't
syrup.
want to.
What? I know, right? But you know what's even better? Sugar.
Yeah.
Regular sugar, not high fructose corn syrup, not sorbitol, not stevia, just sugar. And so if you're like, once you first get rid of all the fake versions of everything in your life, you start eating real foods. So of course, I want you to eat your whole foods. I want you to eat your fruits and vegetables unadulterated from the ground.
Yeah.
But I also want you to look at your yogurt, and instead of eating, you know, light and fit that has a bunch of additives in it to make it light and make it fit, which it's just not good for you anymore. You know, just eat the real thing. Let your fats be fats, you know, let your cheese be a whole fat cheese, let your yogurt be, you know, if you want to get like some, like 2%, like whatever, but you know, let that be what it is.
Yeah.
And then also don't cover your vegetables in like breading them and frying them, you know? So like trying to just kind of get back to basics, you know. When you eat chocolate, eat a good form of chocolate, enjoy it, and then be over it and move on to the next whole food, you know?
So keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
Yeah.
Keep it simple. Let yogurt be yogurt. Let water be purified water,
Yeah.
you know, and then make sure that you're actually eating a lot of greens. I find a lot of people come to me and they feel like, well, I eat all those good things. Well, I eat broccoli. Well, I eat nuts. And it's like, okay, well, for the handful of nuts you eat a day, there's also 6 other things going in that are totally counteracting, you know, the benefits of that. Or, you know, for the 3 broccoli pieces that you have at dinner, you could have been having 10 pieces of broccoli, you know, and really thinking, okay, is my diet mostly comprised of whole foods and things that are unadulterated by processing, or is my diet mostly comprised of adulterated food-like products and a little bit of food?
Yeah.
You know?
And I think what most people need to accept also is you have to be ready to, it's going to take a while to get the results you're looking for, right? There's no easy fix. There's no super fast diet, crazy fad thing. Like you have to be
Even the ones that work fast have a plateau.
Yeah.
You know, people be like, you know, a lot of people come to me because they did intermittent fasting or keto for, you know, 6 months and it worked out great. And then what? And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, you know, once you cut out a major food group or you cut out 16 hours a day that you could, you know, depending on your goals, be replenishing your body from your workout, what else is left to cut out? You know? And so that's where it always comes back to, well, what are your basics?
and is it sustainable?
Right.
Right? Because anybody can force themselves to do anything for 6 weeks, right? But then 6 weeks is up and you're like, all right, now what do I do? Do I continue eating this way? I don't think so. It's not sustainable. And then they go back to their old habits because they don't know any other habits. They went from bad habits to crazy diet idea, and then where they have to meet somewhere in the middle, but they don't know what that middle looks like, so they end up back in their bad habits. They put on all that weight again, or they go back to that unhealthy lifestyle, and then it feels like, you know, it's a very negative kind of mindset after that, and then you got to kind of rebuild from scratch.
Exactly, and that's actually one of the things I touch upon in my book is like, you know, instead of teaching you how to not eat and telling you what to not eat and telling you the times of day to not eat and this and that, I'm going to show you how to eat and what to eat and how delicious it is and how good it feels. You know, is like, just keep it simple.
I think that's a good place to end.
Yeah.
Keep it simple.
Awesome. Keep it simple.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good job.